The Emergency Commission hearing day 1, this incredible law professor destroys the use of the Emergency Act. Doesn't meet any thresholds. Here's the clip.
May I be heard?
Yes, go ahead.
Thank you. Ryan Alford, professor of law at the Boralaskan Faculty of Law, Lakehead University. In its opening statement, the Government of Canada stated it had a reasonable basis for declaring a public order emergency. Unfortunately, a reasonable basis is not necessarily a legal, let alone a constitutional basis for assuming unprecedented and destructive emergency powers. I would like to briefly quote in part the correct legal standard in these circumstances for threats to the security of Canada that constitute a public order emergency. Quote, activities within or relating to Canada directed toward or in support of the threat or use of acts of serious violence, not tied to serious acts of violence in some fashion, not in conjunction with or somehow associated in some fashion with, rather directed toward or in support of the threat or use of acts of serious violence. We are here to receive in public the evidence from the Government of Canada related to the correct legal standard for the proclamation of a public order emergency. And the rule of law requires nothing less. Thank you, Commissioner.
Thank you. Next, if I could call on the Canadian Civil Liberties Association.
My job to be the comic relief. So good morning, Mr. Commissioner. Good morning, Commission Council, members of the public. My name is Kara Zwiebel, and I, along with my co-counsel, Eva Krajeska, who is participating remotely, are representing the Canadian Civil Liberties Association. We will be participating primarily remotely starting next week, but do anticipate attending in person for portions of the coming weeks. And we look forward to participating in the fact-finding role of the Commission and expect to play a particularly active role in the Commission's policy phase and forward-looking functions. The Canadian Civil Liberties Association, or CCLA, is a national, independent, non-governmental organization that is dedicated to the protection and promotion of fundamental rights and freedoms in Canada. The CCLA has been engaged in this important work since its founding in 1964 and is known for taking principled stands on difficult issues that require reconciling fundamental rights with other competing interests. The Commission is aware that the CCLA has sought judicial review of the decision to declare a public order emergency and argues that the Act's legal threshold was not met and that the emergency orders that were put in place by the government breached constitutional rights in a manner that was not reasonable or justified. The CCLA's interest in the Commission's work comes from our concern about the use of emergency powers that circumvent the parliamentary processes and allow the executive branch to rule by fiat. It is a concern that has been around for as long as the organization has existed, and although the excesses of the War Measures Act are now well understood, during the FLQ crisis itself, the CCLA was one of the lone voices critical of the use of that law. As a result of that experience, the organization participated actively in the process that led to the passage of the current Emergencies Act. In particular, the CCLA encouraged Parliament to build meaningful oversight and accountability mechanisms into the Act and to require a high and judicially reviewable threshold for declaring a national emergency. There are many issues that the Commission will be examining which are central to CCLA's work, including the lawful scope of the right to protest, the role of police in facilitating protests while protecting public safety, the relationship between policing authorities, civilian oversight bodies, and government actors, and the surveillance of those involved in dissenting social movements. More broadly, the CCLA's interest in the Commission's work goes to the core of the organization's mandate, protecting the rights and freedoms of Canadians and demanding transparency and accountability from our governments. The CCLA views the Commission as an instrumental part of achieving the goals of transparency and accountability, and our participation in the Commission's proceedings will be aimed at supporting those goals. Thank you.
Thank you. And now I'd like to call on the Democracy Fund, Citizens for Freedom, and JCCF Coalition, please.
Good morning, Commissioner. If there's no objection, I'd like to call my colleagues up from the Democracy Fund and Citizens for Freedom. We had all prepared very brief introductions of ourselves and our organizations and should come in well under the time allotted for a single party.
I won't repeat the comments I made earlier. I think you're well aware that from now on it will be one presentation rather than three. And for today, I'll make the exception I made in the previous case. Go
Absolutely.
ahead.
Thank you very much. I'm Rob Kittredge. I represent the Justice Center for Constitutional Freedoms. And since 2010, the Justice Center has defended the fundamental rights of Canadians through pro bono litigation. A team of Justice Center lawyers were on the ground in Ottawa for the duration of the protests here, and our lawyers have been and continue to be involved in much of the related litigation. We look forward to continuing to defend the rights and freedoms of Canadians here at this inquiry and holding the government to account on its invocation of the Emergencies Act. It likely comes as no surprise that we view the invocation of the Act to have been an unjustified infringement on the fundamental rights of Canadians. I'm joined here today by my co-counsel, James Manson, and my co-counsel, Hatem Kir, is following online. We will each be here in person at various times throughout the inquiry, and I'll turn it over to my colleagues at the Democracy Fund and Citizens for Freedom.
Okay.
Thank you and good morning. My name is Antoine Dailly, counsel together with Amanda Armstrong to Citizens for Freedom, representing a not-for-profit organization representing the interests and perspectives of the peaceful demonstrators in Windsor, Ontario. We are here to assist the Commission in fulfilling its mandate, particularly its fact-finding function as it relates to the protests that occurred in Windsor, which culminated in the widely publicized demonstration near the Ambassador Bridge, and the various corresponding responses by the various levels of government and law enforcement. Citizens for Freedom is here to advance the interest of truth and transparency and to assist this Commission in producing a balanced and accurate public record.
Good morning, Commissioner. Good morning, everyone. My name is Alan Honor, and I am the Litigation Director for the Democracy Fund. The Democracy Fund is a registered charity and a civil liberties organization. As you've heard, we're sharing standing with the JCCF and with Citizens for Freedom. Our interest in this inquiry arises from our legal work. In February of 2022, we sent lawyers to Ottawa and to Windsor to provide demonstrators with legal information about their rights when protesting, as well as the limitations of those rights. Around the same time, we were granted intervener status as a friend of the court at the Superior Court of Justice in Windsor over the Ambassador Bridge injunction proceeding. Currently, we represent dozens of persons who have been criminally charged in relation to the protests at Ottawa, Windsor, and Coutts. And we represent thousands of others who've been charged under the Quarantine Act or provincial offences related to the pandemic. We've also brought applications before Superior Courts and the Federal Court of Canada, challenging laws related to the pandemic. Our objective is to participate in the fact-finding process of this inquiry, particularly as it relates to uncovering the truth about why the federal government invoked a public order emergency and how they used their powers. From our perspective, the government did not meet the requisite legal grounds to invoke a public order emergency for the same reasons you heard from counsel for the Freedom Corps. It follows that the extraordinary measures the government invoked were therefore inappropriate and indeed outside their jurisdiction. Our questions and our submissions will focus on these central issues. Thank you.